Hello crafty friends, welcome to day 6 of Die Cut December 2025. Today the random number generator chose number 53, which corresponded to leaves or leaf dies. So I thought instead of branches and foliage, I would just grab all my individual leaf dies, and here they are. And I thought it would be really fun to start with some of the big leaf dies. I don't use these very often, but I wanted to make this card really leaf focused. So as I say, I grabbed some of the larger ones and I thought I would have some coming in from the bottom right and some coming down from the top left and put my sentiment between those two clusters of leaves. So I mapped it out by putting the dies on the card, and when I was happy I set about colouring some white cardstock so that I could cut my leaves from it. And I chose a bit of hammered textured white cardstock because it actually looks a bit like the surface of a leaf. I started by swiping vintage photo distress oxide all over the cardstock to try and get some of that texture and to make my leaves look a bit autumnal rather than springy or summery. Once I'd covered the card with the brown, I thought I'd bring in some more autumnal colours, so I used spice marmalade and blended that on, and some abandoned coral and blended that on. And as I was looking out the window, I saw the tree at the bottom of my garden had all these colours on its leaves, but still had a little bit of green. So I grabbed bundle sage distress oxide and blended that over too. This looks a bit messy with the streaky lines from the vintage photo, but I knew that when I cut it down into leaf shapes, it would be absolutely fine. So at this point I was happy with the overall colour, but I wanted to add some shimmer and shine. So I took one of my Lindy's Stamp Gang Moon Shadow Mist sprays. I've only got a tiny bit left. I managed to pour far too much out on my glass mat. But I picked it up with my smusher and smushed it all over. And this is a nice brown that goes with the colours that are already there, but there's some gold in it as well, so it leaves a gold shimmer behind. So after the first smushing, I gave it a good dry with my hairdryer, and then I smushed on the rest, and then I gave it a really thorough dry with my hairdryer, and then set about die cutting all my leaves. I did place the dies strategically to try and avoid some of the harsher lines that the swiping of the vintage photo created. But before running it through my die cutting machine, I did place a bit of cardboard, a bit of spare packaging between the card and the cutting plate the dies would bite into, because there's a lot of embossing on these particular dies. And to get that embossing embossed onto the leaves, I find it can be helpful to have something soft, like a bit of cardboard, underneath the cardstock, so that the embossing on the dies have got something to push into, if you see what I mean. So that my leaves didn't look too flat, I added a little bit of spice marmalade and a little bit of abandoned coral in a few places around the edges of the die cuts. And then I spritzed on some more of that Moon Shadow Mist because I wanted some of the shimmer and shine and the dark brown to run along the veins that had been embossed on the die cuts, and to help that I coaxed it along with a paintbrush. I also put my paintbrush straight in the bottle and spattered on a bit more to add a bit of energy and vibrancy, and then I set them aside to dry. While they were drying, I decided to stamp my sentiment directly on my card blank. So I put my card blank in my stamp positioner, put my rule of thirds acetate grid on top, added a thank you stamp. This is a grungy label, which I felt would go well with the kind of grungy leaves. And I placed that in the middle, making sure it was horizontal using a set square. I picked up the stamp, removed the set square and the acetate grid, and then I added ink to my stamp. I started with some spice marmalade, and then I added a bit of abandoned coral and softened the area with my finger where the two colours met. and then I stamped it. So I got a nice multi-tone stamped image. I wanted to add a little bit more darkness and depth, so I gently added a little bit of vintage photo to the stamp, not covering the whole thing. But I stamped that a couple of times until I was happy with the colours and the intensity of the colours. Before sticking my leaves down, I wanted to add a bit of splatter. Again, this is for energy, movement. So I put a bit of scrap paper in the middle of my card blank so I didn't get any spatters inside my card. I then put some spice marmalade down onto my mat, added some water, picked it up with a paintbrush and spattered it in the two corners where the leaves were going to go. I did use a bit of scrap paper to mask off or shield the sentiment. I didn't want to get any spatters on that. And then I arranged my leaves on my card, and when I was happy with their arrangement, I put some high-tack white glue on the back of the leaves and stuck them down in place. And once they were all stuck down well, I used my scissors to chop off the overhanging bits. I didn't want to waste all those overhanging bits though, so for some of them I put some more glue on the back and added them to the card. And as a finishing touch, I brought in some pale gold Nouveau drops and dotted those amongst the leaves, and that I think finished everything off nicely. I didn't want the drops to be too tall, so I gave my card a good smack on my glass mat and tapped it from underneath, and that encouraged the drops to spread out a bit so they're wider and flatter, and I think that worked really well. I was really pleased with how this card turned out. I do hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, do let me know in the comments to leave a thumbs up. Also, if you've got any questions, do leave them in a comment. And if you want to see more from me, do subscribe and ring the notification bell. And I'll see you back here very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.